Hi, good morning. My name is Kristen Kirsch, and I'm going to talk to you today about play, creativity, and adolescence. So what's so important about play? Well, let's start a little bit about thinking about this quote from Albert Einstein. Imagination is more important than knowledge. I wonder why he thought that. Well, I think about thinking about this quote in terms of our economic times and thinking about what the United States economy is dependent on now. Let's go to one of the top writers on play to see what he says about play in the current society. Here's a book that I really highly suggest. It's Play and How It Shapes the Brain, Opens the Imagination, and Invigorates the Soul by Stuart Brown. He says that the advantage of countries like the United States, Britain, France, Germany, and Scandinavian nations, and Japan retain the ability to invent, to dream up solutions to problems that people may not yet even know they have. Nations that remain economically strong are those that can create intellectual property, and the ability to innovate largely comes out of the ability to play. So, what is this really saying? Well, essentially, in a large part, our culture itself, in the form of music, drama, novels, dances, celebrations, and festivals, is really intertwined with play, and Western society has been for a long time. But there seems to be this disconnect between play and society and what we see in everyday life and our education system. So what I want to do is dive into an argument, and I want to argue that now is a time for change in terms of how we conceptualize play, specifically within the classrooms during secondary education with adolescents. So I'm going to walk you through a quick presentation that I have, and I'll be narrating on the side the different aspects of it. So essentially what my thesis is that play is a fundamental part of learning, but is not used in adolescent education. So how can we decide and look at the positive effects of play and integrate it into adolescents' environment within the school system? To use the power of play, it must be fostered by the use of technology, specifically high technology, which we'll get into and explain, through creating digital environments for our students to use and learn in. Now, specifically, to take out of that, what I'm saying is play is a fundamental part of learning, and we'll discuss that a little more in detail. It's not used in adolescent secondary education. And so we want to look at how the positive aspects of play that are already being used in kindergarten and early childhood education can be pulled out and integrated into the adolescent secondary education curriculum. We also want to look at the use of high technology versus low technology, what we mean by that, as well as some counter arguments about play, whether or not play in the environment is fundamentally more supportive of adolescent development, and also whether or not play necessarily needs to have goals to support learning and education. So let me walk through basically the roadmap that I'm going to take you on. First, we're going to go through the introduction of play and the key people who first talked about play, specifically people like John Dewey. Next, we're going to look at the science behind it, the emotion related to play, specifically in cognitive development. We're going to look at the neuroscience behind it and how play supports specific developmental periods during adolescence. These specific parts are going to be the reward system and its relation to risk-seeking and puberty during adolescence. We're going to look at how play fulfills this need of novelty and risk-seeking during adolescence in a safe manner. And we're going to look at how high technology and implementing high technology play can support these faculties in this development in the best possible safe manner. We're going to look at the differences between low technology and high technology. I'm going to describe some counter arguments which involve play in the environment and whether or not play should include necessarily goals or specific rules, or whether play is something that is void of a specific end goal, but the end goal is actually conceived and brought out after the play has occurred. And we're going to look at then, finally, how high technology and play during adolescence also supports the development of faculties that are seen in the development of creativity, a specific needed skill or group of skills that must be created and supported for adolescents to be successful within the 21st century economy, specifically within the Western world and developed countries. So let's go ahead and play. One of the first things that I think about when I hear play are specific actual stories or movies. The first movie that actually used to really scare me, no matter how much Willy Wonka might scare you, especially this image, I think about Willy Wonka and the specific aspects and journey that that story takes you through. Essentially, the story of Willy Wonka and the movement through the factory is a game. It's a game that has small mini goals, not necessarily a clear end goal, and it explores the need for risk-taking and cognitive thinking, executive functioning, as well as overcoming fear and overcoming this feeling of anxiety to understand a safe space for creating and exploration. It's also interesting because most of the characters in this movie are adolescents. The other movie that I think about, and the story specifically, is Alice in Wonderland. Alice has to take this leap of chance by going through a rabbit hole. She herself has no clue what her end goal is or what the rules of engagement are. However, she goes through these different experiences and has small goals along the way that leave her with a lifelong learned experience. So, come with me as we jump down the rabbit hole and explore the different aspects of play. So who says play is important? Well, we've got a couple head guys who really talk about play. You might recognize their names. We've got Freud, Vygotsky, Dewey, Piaget, Wincott, Turner, and Erikson. Specifically, Freud talks about how play is very cathartic and necessary for the developmental periods of children. Erikson talks about the psychological components and the social development that play supports. Piaget talks